It's stupid. It doesn't make any logical sense to manage that way at all. Like you'd be more.
Welcome to 33 Tangents, a roundtable discussion covering a wide variety of topics from digital analytics to working remotely to current happenings in business and technology. Your hosts, Jason Thompson, John Naran, Jen Coons, and myself, Jim Driscoll, all live in different areas of the world but work together in the same company. Our regular day-to-day conversations often go off in various directions, and the goal of this podcast is to share our ideas and find new ways to engage with others. And John's on camera today.
Yeah, I finally got the issue worked out. There's all these different layers of privacy settings, layers in
the
Chrome.
browser.
So it was actually beyond the browser. It was some OS level preference
with my browser. Or my browser. Now you're subconsciously feeding words into my face. Jacking with my mic here while we're recording. John and I were just talking about his new chair, and I'm like, where's Jim? He's usually the prompt one of the group. And John said, "Oh, this is post baby Jim though."
No, I just need to run and get another cup of coffee. Right. I mean, he's been great so far, but last night was just one of those nights he did not want to sleep. Did not want to sleep at all. Got up and fed him at 3 a.m. And, don't want to just like feed him and then put him right back in the bassinet. Give him a little chance to like burp and then, fall back asleep. So he was nodding back off. I started to fall asleep. We got a little recliner in his room. And I'm like, okay, you're falling asleep. Let me quick change your diaper and then, put you back to bed. And he hates getting his diaper changed. So, of course, he wigs out. And this is probably 3:45 at this point. And at that point, he didn't want to go back to sleep. He was wide awake. And I'm like, you little bugger. So, yeah, today's a multi-cup of coffee day. You're on mute.
Because my mouse is I gotta get rid of the Bluetooth mouse. I gotta go to the wired so I can quit complaining about how bad the Bluetooth mouse is.
Yeah, I made that switch a few months ago.
So bad and laggy. John's looking fit.
Huh?
You're looking fit. Are you still doing like your running thing?
I am a little bit, but it's also the fact that it's like 115 degrees every day.
So you just sweat it all off?
Yeah.
You don't even have to do anything. It's just everything.
It does make a big difference with the sweat has to come from somewhere.
I know. Fair enough. Well, it's 115 there. I was telling John that it snowed this morning. So
really, you got snow this morning?
Yeah, I woke up to a skiff of snow.
That's some extremity. Yeah,
it's not. I'm so done.
I would be too. Utah's beautiful, when I went out there to visit, but I couldn't live there with that much snow. Getting snow in May, not cool for me.
It's not normal. Mm-hmm. This is not normal. So, anyway. That is that. What are we talking about today?
So I'm curious to see where this topic will go. It's been one of the items rattling around in the back of my mind because I know we all experience it from time to time, and I have over a couple times over my career. But this will happen to consultants every once in a while where they start working with a client and the client starts to try to micromanage them. And the micromanagement can take multiple forms, whether it's like expecting immediate responses to inquiries, questions, or whatnot, constant follow-ups on status of items, even after, being proactive on your side. So I want to dig into that because, again, having experienced it myself, I know I'm probably not the only one. And, and it can be frustrating at times. I mean, being micromanaged as an employee is frustrating and toxic and not healthy, in and of itself. But to be micromanaged by a client, it it brings a whole other set of challenges. And again, not a very healthy relationship. So kind of wanted to start off with, what have you guys seen with that kind of scenario? And then let's talk about the different ways that it could be handled.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point is that I think the conversation can be abstracted to the employee because I think if we break it down, it's probably happening for similar reasons. And um, while the challenges may be different, if you're a contractor or you're a consultant or you're an employee, I think at its core, it probably comes down to the same set of principles and why it's happening. So I'm not sure we could take this a number of different directions. To me, it really comes down to communication and setting proper expectations. And I'm going to quickly, we're like, what, 5 minutes in, and I'm already going to go off on a slight tangent here. So I was having a conversation on Twitter the other day. I saw something on LinkedIn that talked about how bosses shouldn't send emails after like 5 or 6 o'clock during the day, or after 5 or 6 o'clock at night. It sets a really bad precedent for your employees that they have to be always on. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, how does that work in today's landscape where, and not even for companies that are fully distributed or fully remote, you have distributed companies that have locations, over a wide geographic range. What does 5 o'clock mean? When do I stop sending emails? Like John's in Thailand, so do I have to stop sending emails at 10 in the morning? It doesn't make sense to me. And so I put something out there on Twitter, and it turned actually into a really good conversation about setting expectations about when a reply is needed and what is expected. And I think a lot of times as consultants, as employees, as bosses, as people hiring in outside expertise, we fail to have that conversation. And so if we don't have that conversation, then it seems like the default is everything is an emergency. Everything has to have a response now. And so I think by simply being upfront with putting a bit more structure into how we operate and setting proper expectations, I think we address a lot of those problems right out of the gate. Now, is that going to address every problem where you have someone that wants to own and truly be a micromanager because it feels like it gives them power? No. But I think it's going to solve a lot of the cases where the micromanagement is just a default because people don't know what the expectation is. And I think that that's been enhanced, or there's been more visibility into that as the workforce has become more distributed and companies have been more open to remote work. If I don't see you, I have a hard time knowing what's going on. And so my default's going to be, I'm going to freak out. I need to micromanage you until I understand what's going on. Sorry, that was all over the place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think you were mainly talking about communication, which I totally agree with. I actually interpret micromanagement as kind of overly demanding as well. I don't know if that was the intention you were thinking about, Jim, but I mean,
I was thinking, multiple dimensions of it. So overly demanding is a good one. Just frequent and, let's use a good term like incessant conversation or incessant communication. That's also another form it takes. So, I mean, it's multiple facets.
in terms of that, I was actually wondering, maybe posing a question back to us, if you think our business model, in the sense that we're not charging, per hour, per 15 minutes, per communication, does that empowers some clients, and it's definitely the minority or non-existent on our current clients, but um, does that empower some people to overly kind of try to take advantage of that, abuse it? Yeah.
Time. I think so, but thankfully for us, that has been a rarity.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple things. One, that's on sales to make sure they're selling the right deals, that we're aligning with the right types of clients. But ultimately, that component I think comes down to how you value the relationship. And I'm not going to say the name of the company or the person. You're actually working with him right now on an engagement, John. But we had a client in the past that I love to tell this story because it really helps to illustrate how this model works. Is that it's built on mutual trust. So for us, we put a lot of trust in our clients that they're not going to abuse our time. If you read the letter of the contract, there's a lot of leeway in there that they could abuse that time very easily and legally be justified to do so. But we trust that they're not going to do that. And conversely, there's a lot of trust that our clients place in us because most of them are used to the billable hour model where they at least have some kind of unit that they can report back to and say, well, company X spent 5 hours working for us. So at least there's that kind of measure that they can say something got done. We don't have that. What we have is creating value and solving problems for our clients. And so they put a lot of trust in us that that is going to get done and they'll have something valuable to report back to their management chain on. But what I love about this story is that we had this client call me up and say, Jason, I'm really concerned that my team is abusing your team's time. If that's the case, please let me know. I don't want that to happen. I want there to be, a mutual respect for what we're trying to solve together, and we need to work on this together. And I said, it's interesting. Why are you bringing that up? And he said, the last thing I want to do is for you guys to fire us because we need you. And this is a really important relationship for us. And the only way that this works is if we have mutual trust and respect for each other. And I love that conversation because it encapsulates why for us it works so well. And I think it can be expanded to other agencies, to the employee-employer relationship. It's about trust and knowing that over the long term that this is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. And if we're looking to burn one another, someone's going to leave that relationship. And where does that leave us?
So that's how we deal with them. We just end the relationship.
We have.
I guess.
No, we have.
To answer the core question of this topic. Yeah.
No, but I mean, it's the same way for an employee and employer.
Right.
I mean, think about it as an employee where you felt like there wasn't that mutual trust and an employer was just trying to burn you out. Ultimately what happens? You end up leaving that employer and it costs them dearly, especially the type of people that we have. Like that's a huge loss to leave that relationship. And so, yeah, I mean, whether it's an employee, employer, a client, agency, it's the same where I left off.
I mean, it was a great rant wherever you were.
The audience can just extrapolate what you were going to say.
Okay, fine.
No.
I don't know where I left off.
No, John had mentioned about the ultimate answer just being just end the relationship. And you said that's what we've done in the past, where we start to realize that there is a relationship where there's not mutual benefit, and you have someone trying to micromanage every piece of it.
Yeah, and again, I think that's regardless if it's client, agency, employee, employer. It's the same dynamic where it comes down to relationships. And if you don't view it as a mutually beneficial relationship and it's one-sided, ultimately it's not going to work out over the long term. And I think far too long, again, regardless of the model, it's been looked at as one-sided. In the employer-employee relationship, it's the employer has the upper hand. And I'm going to dictate and mandate what you're going to do as an employee. And it's in our world, it's typically been the purchaser that has had the upper hand. I'm bringing you in, I'm paying you to do a service, and so I'm going to have the upper hand in the relationship. And so the consultant has often been put in a lower position, and we've tried to get rid of that model. We don't see one as elevated above the other, and we've looked at it, and that's both as at a 33-6 perspective. If you look at how we structure our teams and our reporting hierarchy, we're very much, it's about a holistic relationship. And we've tried to expand that to our clients as well, where we're not placing ourselves above them and we're not allowing them to place us beneath them. It's we see eye to eye and we have mutual respect for what we're trying to create together. And if we see this as a relationship that's mutually beneficial, we'll not want to take advantage of the other party because we need the other party in order to accomplish something greater than we can do on our own.
Mic drop.
Wow, we're done. That's the shortest podcast that we've ever recorded.
Yeah.
Post baby Jim needs more coffee to get going in the morning. I love post baby Jim.
You know, there's part of me that's like, dear God, I just want to sleep. Why can't you sleep through the night yet? But then there's part of me that's like, don't rush it. Like, you know, these are times that are going to go by fast. And right now, he just, you know, one of our routines is Suzanne will go to bed like at 9, and I'll feed him at 9. And then, you know, usually then he'll just kind of snuggle in. So we've got recliners in the living room. So I put the recliner up and he just snuggles in. And for the last several nights, we've fallen asleep there on the recliner for a couple of hours. And I'm like, okay, I'm not getting the best sleep, but it's still kind of fun because before I know it, he's going to be crawling and then walking and not want to do that. So, you know, it's a matter of weeks we're talking about here. So it's like, you know, embrace it, enjoy it. And, you know,
That's true.
That's what I'm trying to do.
And before you know it, he's going to be rolling in at 1, 2 in the morning, and you're going to be like, why can't you just let me sleep?
No, and you know, like of the two of us, and this is not to imply that she doesn't care, but I know I am going to be the one texting him when he's 17 at 11:30 at night, like, where the F are you? What are you doing? That's going to be me.
Yeah, I am the same. As much as I say, you know what, I'm just gonna go to sleep. It just doesn't work. So anyway, enjoy each stage for what it is.
Exactly.
So I'm interested, either as an employee or as a consultant, what are things that you've done, Jim and John, to address it? So I'm sure that you can pull examples as a consultant, and I'm sure you could pull examples as being an employee where you have been put in a position where you felt like you were being micromanaged. What have you done that has worked, and what have you done that made the situation worse?
I mean, I could go first, and this is going to be a bit of a rambling answer because I think there's stages. Speaking of stages and growth, I mean, there's levels at which you try to address it, and I'll be honest, there were a couple times as an employee that I ultimately just pulled the ripcord, and after multiple conversations, I just was like, this is not the environment for me. This is not the place for me, and made the decision to move on. But those situations, or that remedy, came after multiple tries elsewhere. And one of the things I try to tell people is like there's multiple different ways people lead. There's the rah-rah cheerleader kind of leader, the person that gets up and gives the rousing speech or the motivating speech. And then there's those that kind of lead by example and just like, hey, let me show you what I do, how I do it. And that's typically the way I do. I just go about work in general. Let me just show you. Let my actions speak for themselves. And typically that's where I start is because a lot of times I feel talk is cheap. So it's let me show you what I can do. Let me prove that I can do it without, again, a lot of times for me, the micromanagement has always seemed to start with just incessant follow-ups. Whether it's, we talked about something yesterday and it's like, all right, I plan to have this out in 3-4 days, or probably next, I'm looking at next week for delivering this. And then, a day later, it's like, can you give me another update on it? Well, we just talked about this yesterday. That's how they always seem to start. So how I try to start to remedy the situation again is actually letting my work speak for itself. When, make a commitment for a deadline, or make a commitment to a deadline for a deliverable, making sure that's hit. And after multiple times, like, okay, when I tell you something's going to be done at this point, or I will, reach out to this person by this point, and I'm giving very specific examples, but, showing and having a track record of when I say something's going to be done, it's done, and there's no need for repeated follow-ups. Again, that seems to be for me the most common form of micromanagement, is just the incessant asking of where something's at, and that's what really grates on my nerves.
Yeah, and I think you brought up what my recommendation would be, is that it has to come from action, right? We can complain about it, and we can maybe do things to help alleviate the constant follow-up through providing updates and consistency there, but ultimately it comes down to delivery. And so if you're delivering consistently, hopefully that solves the problem. If not, then it's probably another level of issues that you have to deal with. But ultimately, that's what I have found, is that people in that position just have a general lack of trust, and the incessant follow-up is giving them peace of mind that things are moving forward, because there isn't that level of trust there. And so hopefully you can address that by delivering often and consistently and build that trust. If not, then I think there's a different conversation that has to be had.
Yes. So, and again, like, I'm focusing on one symptom of micromanagement, because that seems to be the most common one that I come across, is, so, like, after, developing a track record of, doing what needs to be done, on time, correctly, with, quality work delivered, whatnot. If that still exists, that's when I look to have, like, the more direct conversation and try to get to the root of it, because whether it's an employer, a boss, a colleague, or when being a consultant, a client, I try to build that kind of personal relationship, that deep rapport, where you can have very direct conversations. So then the next step is the direct conversation. And I mean, there have been times where I've had that, and not to rehash previous conversations, but some of the answers I've gotten in the past were, well, I know that you usually do it, but I have to do it for everyone because there's others on the team that aren't as thorough.
The managing to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another another thing that results in micromanagement is you've got employees up here, you've got employees down here, but I got to manage to everyone down here.
Can I tell you just a side story? My first job out of college, I can't remember what I got. I got some kind of a perk from my boss. I was working on a project and putting in a lot of late nights, and I got some kind of perk for it. And then I noticed, like, one of the other team members on the team ended up with the same perk, and I went into my boss's office. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, this guy wasn't even pulling his weight in this project, and a lot of us were, doing double and triple time to pull this off. And he's like, dude, sometimes you just have to do that because it's easier to manage to that than have to deal with the complaining when he didn't get what everyone else got. And I'm like, really, we're gonna do this manage to the lowest common denominator thing? But it happens all the time. Anyway, completely unrelated, but it just reminded me of that when he said, I'm like, why are we giving this stuff to these guys?
So, I mean, very similar situation. So this is going back several years, working for a technology vendor. I'm on the analytics team, and at that point that they were open to, like, work from home days. So there was still a central office everyone went into, but you could work from home. And some people work from home 4 days out of the week and came in just that one day to meet with certain people in person. Then everything else, every other time they were at home. So at this point I was working maybe 2 days from home, like Mondays and Fridays, and I'd be there Tuesday through Thursday. But the thing is kind of where the office was at during the summer, especially, traffic was horrendous. It could take me sometimes an hour and a half to get home, based on on traffic. So that's why I went to my boss, and again, I'm delivering things left and right. I'm like, how about a third day? I'll be here Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll make sure key meetings are scheduled on those days. I will get more done at home. It will save me so much time in commuting. And the answer was no. I kind of need you here. Well, the root of the answer is not because I wasn't trusted. It was because there were other people on the team who maybe weren't as trusted as I was. And if I were given the ability to work from home 3, and I was probably even going to stretch it to 4 days, they would have to do it for them, and they wouldn't trust that they would get the work done from home.
I do that for
So
you, Jim. I have to do it for everybody else.
exactly. And while you may get stuff done, everybody else may not. So kind of need you here. And I'm like, okay, fine. And that's kind of demoralizing.
Yeah.
So it's,
Well, it's
where I was going.
demoralizing because we're pushed to do more and better, but when
Mhm.
we're treated like everyone else, then it's like, well, why am I trying to overachieve if I, it's a
Mhm.
weird
It,
scenario,
it's
right?
stupid. It doesn't make any logical sense to manage that way at all. Like
John's right.
you'd be
It is
more.
stupid.
I mean, in that
It is
in
stupid.
the case that Jim just mentioned, like who the unhappy one is Jim, the overperformer, not
Yeah.
the and the so the underperformer's happy. Instead of making the
No, and
underperformer happy, who would be the bigger loss
dude,
to the company? Like
I
makes no
mean,
sense. It is stupid.
I get it. We're gonna have to pull that out as a soundbite. It is stupid, but it happens time and time again. Unfortunately, I've worked for a couple companies that went through financial hardships, and the default position of management created an environment where the least valuable productive employees were the focus, and they were doing things to make sure that, again, we're managing to the lowest common denominator. And what ended up happening is what you could probably think: the people that we needed the most to stick around and help turn the company around were the first to leave, the high
Mhm.
performers, the ones that had options. But we weren't treating them the way they needed to be treated because we were managing to this lowest common denominator. We were making them miserable, but on the flip side, at least we were making the low performers feel like they were part of the team and happy. So whatever.
It's interesting you mentioned that because my examples that I was thinking about being micromanaged on mainly on the client side, all have to do with time as well as most people's stories. I'm thinking of three managers, like one that kind of made me always like that really managed everyone sitting in their seats at the right time, even if you were done with work, you couldn't leave, that kind of thing. There was the manager that uh, famously asked me what I was doing on a Sunday, and I said going to a baseball game, and then the response was, "I hope they have Wi-Fi."
Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
I am. Um, and
Man,
then
this
there
this
was
episode could turn into just these stories because I think we all have some amazing
yeah,
ones. Sorry, go ahead.
and
Oh
then
yeah.
and then I'm also thinking of the time that I was managed to track every 15 minutes.
Okay, so I have two
but
stories from I
in
have two stories from that. I'm gonna try to remember. Go.
Okay, but in any case, I mean, cutting to the chase in all these cases, and granted, they were all earlier on in my career, but the way I dealt with them in all cases was just to leave, really. So maybe that's a cop out of an answer, but
No, it's
that I
unfortunately
just didn't
what
want to.
happens.
I always felt like, well, especially earlier on in your career, if you are micromanaged that heavily, or in ways that just don't make any logical sense, at least in my experience, there's really a limited amount of what you can do to change the environment, unfortunately. And I think that's why it's really stupid for management to act that way because you do lose talent.
Yeah,
And in all these cases, the reason I left had nothing to do with performance. It was all the fact that yeah, felt like too much like a cog, a
yeah.
badly treated cog.
No, you're
Not even
right,
just a
and
cog, yeah.
yeah, and you're right, and you feel like you have lack of power individually to do anything, and that's a good segue into my next story. Is that I had an employer where that was the case. We were extremely micromanaged on time, and we were told you will be in your seat at 8 in the morning, and you will not leave until after 5 at night. And we're gonna walk around and do head checks to make sure that people are in their desks when they're supposed to be there. And we were frustrated with the messaging. We felt like we're smart people. We should be trusted with getting the job done. Why is this happening? So to your point, we felt individually we didn't have much option or say. So we got a large group of people together, brought in the VP over our organization, and we aired our grievances and said, this is not creating a really good work environment for us. Needless to say, the meeting didn't go too well. And there's one brief moment in there that really helps encapsulate the entire meeting. Someone raised their hand and said, I just have a what if scenario. What if I need to go get some dental work done? My dentist office doesn't open until 9 and they close at 5. What do you recommend that I do? I shit you not, this was the word. This was the response, and it was not a joke. Well, can you work with your dentist and see if maybe they can start earlier in the day for you, or perhaps stay open on the weekend, and you can go on a weekend? That was the actual response. And much to your, I hope the stadium has Wi-Fi response. And they're not joking. That was the expectation. Really? I'm going to ask my dentist to stay open because my boss says I have to be at my desk from 8 to 5. This is crazy.
Yeah.
I think there are going to be some people that are listening to this podcast that were potentially in that meeting. So
This is why there are labor laws.
it's crazy.
But I have another story, and this, John, goes along with like the managing down to 15 minutes. So working on the agency side of the organization, they managed everybody's timesheets. And I mean, there were weekly timesheet reports, and they looked at, where you're at for the month, where you're at for the week, and whatnot, and how much time you're putting in the admin bucket and whatnot. So they would manage you down to like 15-minute increments. And like, your admin bucket was too high last week. Are you sure you're not missing projects? Or even, someone sends you an email, that's about 15 minutes you spend on that client, and don't answer, the email unless you have the ability to bill to that client. But where this was at is, there was a guy on my team, top performer, and he was getting married. And he took 2 weeks off, for the wedding. They took like a week and a half for the honeymoon, and then maybe a day or two before he came back. So then the following month, when they ran the reports, they were like, well, he had a lot of time off last week. So his bill, while his utilization rate remained the same, his billability was low. I'm like, yeah, he got married. Well, we need to minimize that. I'm like, it's a one-time thing. If you look at every month previously, his billability rate is near the top. And they just kept coming around. Well, last month it was this. I'm like, yeah, he got married. Drop it. Like it's not like he didn't have something to do and was just sitting there on his hands. He got married. Like, well, what are we missing here?
I kind of wish we had hourly utilization rates so we could beat Jim up for taking time off to spend at home with his baby. That would have been fun. No, it's crazy, but it's even more impactful than that. As a consultant or an employee where you're micromanaged down to those time buckets, it sucks. My very first job out of college, there was an experiment where we did time tracking to the half-hour increment. At least it wasn't to the 15-minute increment. I wasn't a consultant. I was a full-time employee, but we had to do timesheets. That was my first introduction to timesheets, and I've hated it ever since. But my feedback to my boss at the time was, that we're like not giving you the real numbers. The whole idea was we're gathering this data so we can better run the team and run the company. I'm like, but there's no value to me as an employee to give you good data. I'm not getting any benefit from this data. And so I told him, I'm like, look, we're all giving you bad data just to get it done. Just to get it done. I want you to know that. So the whole idea that we're gathering data to be able to be more informed backfire because we're not giving you good data. So it's bad in that scenario. It's even worse and potentially have some legal ramifications when you get to the consulting side of the world, because one of the biggest fears of an hourly consultant is not meeting your utilization rate. And so what mindset does that put you in when you're submitting your timesheets on Friday? What do you think about doing? I guarantee most think about padding the numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
I would rather pad the numbers than get yelled at again for not hitting my utilization rate. So that padding isn't just faking the numbers in my first job out of college. That padding now is faking the numbers that actually gets billed to a client that said, I did this work when I may not have. And that gets into some really, really dangerous territory.
Hmm. Oh yeah, like I mean, even the most honest person, your best employee, will do that just to get the admin department who manages that and sends out the emails and whatnot about it, just to get them off their back.
There's no question about it. So I mean, that's it's tricky. And a lot of these things come down to what we've been talking about is this concept of managing to the lowest common denominator. So maybe that kind of is the discussion which leads to micromanagement and all of these oversight pieces, is that we get to a point where that is the case. And I've never built a company or run a team within a massive company. So it's not fair to me to say how hard that is to do that. I don't know if you guys have experiences. I know John has worked for some massive companies. But I imagine as you grow and scale, it becomes really, really difficult to not manage to your lowest common denominator to reduce risk. And so it may be easy for me to say, yeah, we have a team of, we have a small team. We're, under 20 people. It's super easy to manage everybody to the right level. But at 2,000, at 20,000, that probably becomes almost impossible. I don't know. So I want to also be realistic that I realize there's very real challenges with scale and size that, with things that make perfect sense to me and clarity at a small scale may not be easy and may not be possible at a large scale. I just don't know.
Well, that's why you work for a small company, and not you specifically. That's why, someone should work for a small company.
For sure.
And I'll say that I think it's stupid at any company size.
John is on another level today. I love it. That's just stupid.
That's just stupid. I'm always very short and succinct.
I love post baby Jim John.
It's the post baby Jim era, I think is.
Yes, this is a good era.
We need to reset the calendars.
Yeah. Anyway, I have one more quick story, and then I'm sure we've gotten all over the map here. But back to my first job out of college with the time tracking. We were also on was it AOL Instant Messenger? The little yellow icon guy going like this.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Instant Messenger.
Yeah, so we were on that, and it had like all the platforms now. It's got the green dot if you're online and active, the yellow dot if you're online but you're inactive, and then the closed circle if you're offline. We had management that would actively monitor how often your green dot was online versus your yellow I'm online but I'm away dot. And someone in the engineering team wrote a little script that you could run on your computer that would do something like to the mouse programmatically to make it look like you were at your computer when you weren't at your computer. So if we would like go take a break, maybe walk to another building and play ping pong, we'd load up that script, and if the management team looked at our online status, it would show green, even though we weren't there. So, haha.
And I think that story, and we were also talking. We were talking about with the timesheets. I mean that goes to show that when you have that kind of micromanagement policy, when you're trying to manage a person to that level, especially those that are your top performers, the ones that know what they're doing, they're going to find a way to fudge the system so that what you're managing to is just ineffective.
But it just sends the bad. To John's point, it's stupid, right? It just sends.
You can't get around it.
You can't get around it. It just sends the wrong message to the most valuable people in your organization. And even if they are finding ways to circumvent the system, ultimately that can't be a foundation for a good long-term relationship, right? So I may be, getting away with being micromanaged, and I'm finding ways to have you not micromanage me, but it's because I'm trying to game the system, not because I'm in an environment where that isn't at play. And ultimately your top people are not going to want to be there. and that's unfortunate, right? I mean, you see top people move around company to company until they find a good fit, but you often
Hmm.
see middle and lower performers sticking with companies a long time, um, because they're treated fairly well. I mean, we're managing to that lowest level. And I don't know what the answer is. Hopefully, here we have people that stay for a long time. Jim's up to like 4 years or something.
Almost 4 years.
It's amazing. Man, that makes me want to like have tears of joy. Um,
Nice.
but hopefully that's because we're managing to a different level. But again, and John's going to say it's stupid at any level. I,
No.
I don't I don't
My-
I don't know how challenging it is at a larger level and what the answers are. I'm hoping this conversation will generate some conversation with our listeners, and maybe we can get someone on that has solved this for a larger organization. But um, to me, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jim, that it's managing to that lowest common denominator that comes across as micromanagement to everybody in the organization, and to a top performer like you or John, that isn't a place that you typically want to be.
Hmm. And what I think we've spent a lot of time talking about from the employee perspective. Whether it's you try to set the track record that this level of management is not necessary. Have the conversations, and yes, ultimately it's you just feel it's toxic and you move on. Um, Maybe kind of bring it back full circle and start to wrap things up. I think some of those things are also applicable when you're looking at a um, client consultant kind of relationship. And I think it's, yes, it's starting out early on, setting the expectation, building the rapport, but ultimately, maybe it's not your key stakeholder that's necessarily managing you to that level or trying to manage you like every other vendor. Um, Maybe it's somebody else that's part of the relationship. Are there different steps? Is there a different process to try to remedy and address that situation?
Um, I think first and foremost, it comes down to communication and open communication.
Hmm.
And so before things are escalated, I think it's a matter of having mutual respect for each other. And if you have someone on your project team you feel is overstepping their bounds or micromanaging, is to have an open and honest communication with that person, and not in an attacking way, not in a going to them and I'm upset and I'm just going to lay it all out their way, but just having a conversation, say, look, we're trying to accomplish something together, and let me talk about a few things that are making it difficult for me to do that. And maybe that opens up a dialogue where they open up and say, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that, but let me fill you in on a few things. I'm getting a tremendous amount of pressure from person X over here, and I'm kind of passing that on because I don't know how to manage that. We don't know, right? And so until you have that open dialogue, it's tough to say. And so I would say that that's where you have to start, and just have that mutual respect for who you're working with, whether it's a key stakeholder or whether it's a person on the ground you're working with. Give them that mutual respect, and default position that we're trying to accomplish something together, and they're not out to get you, and they're not out to make your life difficult. If you go into it thinking that, then it's probably going to be a no-win, because you're going to go in looking to fight. You're going to put them in a defensive position, and it's probably not going to go over well. And not to say you shouldn't be firm in those discussions, but you need to go in with respect. And then ultimately, you have a chain that you can work through. If it doesn't work, we have key stakeholders that you can elevate those conversations to say, look, you brought us in to solve a problem. We're not able to solve your problems because team member X is trying to micromanage us, and we're not able to jointly produce the value that you purchased. How are we going to solve that? But I think that should come later. That should come much later, after first trying to address the problem up front with open, honest, and trusting communication that we're all in this together.
Jason's getting too good at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. No, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Um, and yeah, the worst thing I was thinking of is the worst thing you could do is kind of go in frustrated, and sometimes that's one thing you don't want to handle in the moment. I mean, I know for me personally, when I feel that frustration coming on, that's when I should not address it. because I know for me, I pretty much can, when I get really angry or really frustrated, it becomes almost like scorched earth.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay, walk away. You need to calm down before you address this.
And I think that's great advice in general, because I'm very much the same way, and dealing a lot on the sales side and working with procurement teams, they tend to really push my buttons. And early on, I would not take that pause, and I would just full on go in there like.
Oh, I wish we had the video recorded.
Right.
That was a great little thing too.
It's like there's a Simpsons episode where Bart and Lisa are like, "All right, I'm just gonna be punching, and I'm just gonna be kicking, and if you walk into it, that's your fault." But that's how I would go into the conversations, and it never went anywhere good. It was always a fail. So I agree, and it's a good life lesson for any kind of potentially heated conversation is to walk away first and recenter, and then come back at it at a more level playing field, so that you're not putting your and I don't even want to say opponent or opposition. It's the other person on the other side of the table in a defensive position, because it will be a no-win in that case. Now we're gonna have to figure out how to get video, because we've had some good video moments here.
Yeah, there's been some good video clips. The video is working out phenomenally. So.
The yellow guy that's going like this icon.
This, and you're just punching like this.
Yeah.
If I just start walking toward you. So no, I think this has been a great conversation.
I mean, if nothing more, I've liked the personal stories of. I'm glad that I'm not the only one that has the dentist story, John, with his Wi-Fi stadium story.
We've all that's unreal.
I don't feel so alone now.
Yeah. Granted, the stadium did have Wi-Fi. Sorry, I still talked over you.
Probably not good enough though to work.
Yeah. I think we've all had those kinds of bosses at some point, and honestly, I think in a way it's good to have them early in your career, because it teaches you early on what not to be, or how not to do it. But I also think it's also unhealthy to have it early on in your career, because or actually another reason why it's good early on is because when you get further into your career and you find that good boss, you appreciate them more.
Yeah.
But also I think it's kind of unhealthy too at the beginning of your career, because it could, really set some bad, like, subconscious patterns that you don't realize that are there. It'll kind of like ingrain some bad behaviors.
Man, Jim looking at the positive side, saying that the bad bosses out there are actually adding value.
Yeah, no, I mean it does. Like, I mean, I early in my career,
you can't have the good without the bad.
Yeah, and you don't recognize the good without the bad to compare to. So, I mean, like, and just one bit of advice I would tell to anybody who's just starting out in your career, maybe seek out that bad boss for just a little while, just so you can kind of see that kind of behavior. So then when you get further in your career, you recognize when you have a supportive boss that it really helped you grow.
I don't think it'll be too hard to seek out the bad bosses either. And
Not
I think,
all.
have we had this as a topic before, where we talked about how companies don't invest in training their employees, and that you think that just because you're really good at doing what you do, then you're naturally going to be good in a management position without any training? That's why there's so many bad bosses, because we don't train people how to lead. And we think, we should. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. And I think we've touched on it before.
We have. We actually. Go, John.
I was going to say, but my final thought twist was that, kind of to Jim's point too, like, being a micromanager doesn't mean that you're not a productive boss. I mean, you can be highly productive and highly successful as a micromanager as well.
True. Yeah, it's true.
But it just doesn't jive with us.
It's true.
Yeah. But especially if you have an industry where it's you churn and burn. There's a glut of average to below average candidates. You can just keep moving through them, because maybe your business model just basically requires a warm body in the seat.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Big 5 consulting agencies, I'm looking at you. They're really good at the churn and burn, and they're really profitable and good at it. So Just not our model.
Yep.
Cool. I like post baby Jim.
A little scatterbrained.
Took a little while to get going, but once we got going.
Yeah. Like most episodes, we kind of start off slow, and then it's like, we come to a good conclusion.
Agreed. Good to see you on camera, John. Now we're gonna have to figure out how to get the video feed. Jen says she's not gonna be a guest if we have the video, so I don't know.
Are we still recording?
Yeah,
we're still recording.
Okay.
So
I like it when we don't even see the record button. Last episode with Jim Gordon, we had this like 8-minute intro and we were just flowing, and then we rolled into the conversation and Jim Gordon said, "Wait, we were recording all that?" I said, "Yeah, we're keeping that."
Why not?
And we published all of that too.
That's the good stuff right there when you don't know
the
record buttons on.
The end credits.
Yes, the end credits. Yeah.
Did you end up seeing Endgame?
Going tonight.
Oh, tonight. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it was crazy just over the weekend, so I wasn't able to get there. And then I'm going with a buddy of mine. He had something Monday night, and then just last night we couldn't go. So we have tickets for tonight.
Cool.
So I've like the last several days, I've just tried to lock down social media as much as possible, just so I don't see like any like accidental spoilers or whatnot.
Yeah, I caught it over the weekend myself.
Nice.
I haven't said anything because I know.
Please don't.
I don't want to. Yeah.
So I will. I'll give you my thoughts tomorrow morning.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. So I guess we can wrap up for now, and we'll catch you guys later.
See you.
All right. So long.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to reach us, you could do so by emailing podcast@33sticks.com or on the web at www.33sticks.com. The 33 Tangents podcast is a production of 33 Sticks.